Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks very much to Ben and the Farm Riders Executive for the opportunity to come in and have a bit of a yarn to you this afternoon about the sort of current state of play in the Australian cotton industry. I also want to acknowledge NAB Agri down there with Jeff and the team, who are obviously the corporate sponsors of today, and thanks for their support for farm riders. As Ben's mentioned, I want to just cover a bit about the seasonal outlook and what's happening this year with cotton. Specifically, have a little bit of a look at the growth in the industry and as has been mentioned, down in the Riverina, down in the south, and then finally just reflect back on some of the social licence issues that our industry had back in the 1990s and how that's been turned into an opportunity these days, how we've actually turned things around, and it's a great opportunity for our industry. So it certainly is a real privilege to be able to talk to you about the Australian cotton industry, because it's through the hard work of our growers and our researchers and all parts of the industry that we have got today a world-leading industry. Now, I know everyone says their industry is world-leading, but this industry is world-leading, and it's something that all Australians should be really proud of. We're world-leading not only in the yields that we produce, so the yields of Australian cotton are 3 times the global average. So last season, the average yield was around 11 bales of cotton per hectare. And so, at over $500 a bale, and with growing costs of around $4,000 and a bit a hectare, you can see that it is a profitable crop, and that's why people are wanting to be involved in it. Our growers are incredibly efficient producers of natural fibre, and this coming season, I think we're going to produce probably close to 1 million tonnes of cotton lint, 1 million tonnes of fibre, and that's fibre that's in demand around the world. And that 1 million tonnes is going to come off less than 500,000 hectares, less than 500,000 hectares. So, just really efficient producers of natural fibre. And certainly when you think about the outlook for this season, I was listening to the Country Hour yesterday, and they were saying it's official. It was the wettest winter on record, and no doubt that brings some challenges. But gee, it's fantastic news for irrigators and cotton producers, and certainly we've watched as the major storage dams have filled over the last few months. And I just think about the Macquarie Valley, and it's only 3 or 4 months ago that Burrendong Dam that feeds the Macquarie system sitting at 10%, and then now it's sitting at 130%, and they can't get the water out of it quick enough. And those growers in the Macquarie are going to have certainty about irrigation water for the next 2 to 3 years. And that's just phenomenal for them, because that lets them take advantage of the forward markets. That lets them forward sell that crop, and that's great news for those growers. And the increase in those dams means that we're going to see a crop of around 4 million bales, as Ben's mentioned. Now that number, it's all happening at the moment, and I guess we'll sort of firm that number up in the next few weeks, because certainly some of the areas it's pretty wet and we might not get the full plant in. Other areas they're trying to get every bit they can in, but certainly 4 million bales of cotton, and a bale of cotton is 227 kilograms, so 500 pounds in the old measure, and certainly that's a reasonable sized crop for Australia. At this stage, we're anticipating that the irrigated crop's going to be around 320,000 hectares, and then the dry land, the rain-grown crop, could be up around 180, 200,000 hectares. And so that's very significant. The industry is split this season and most seasons, about 40% in Queensland and about 60% in New South Wales. That all said, there's still a few areas that could use a little bit more water. And when you go up to the Darling Downs, they've certainly they haven't had quite as wet a season, and there hasn't been the overland flows to fill some of the ring tanks. In the lower Ballon, get past St George down to Dirranbandy, it's still haven't had a lot of flows down there, so they're not going to be at a full plant. And in the McIntyre Valley, up on the border rivers, still not at full plant there. So those areas just haven't seen quite as wet as some of the areas in the south of New South Wales. But all in all, it's going to be a big year, and it's fantastic news for the industry and all parts of the industry. In some areas, though, we're not sure, quite what the irrigated area can get to, because we're still suffering from the impacts of the Murray-Darling Basin Plan. And when I say the impacts, You may have seen in the media recently the campaign that a number of groups like Cotton Australia and the water user groups in a lot of the valleys and National Farmers Federation are running the Enough is Enough campaign. What we're saying in the Northern Basin is that there's been enough water bought back at the moment, because those buybacks are a sort of a pretty easy method for the bureaucrats, but have massive impacts back at the regional community level. And you only have to look at towns like Warren, and I'm going back to Warren because 30 years ago, to start my career in Warren and see that vibrant rural community, and to see what the buybacks of water have done to that community. And we always told the Murray-Darling Basin Authority this would happen, and here we are, 7 or 8 years into the program, and their data is now telling us that, oh, surprise, surprise, there's been job losses of 30% in Warren and Weewar and Dirranbandi and these other towns. And towns like that can't sustain 30% losses in jobs. That gets it to a tipping point. So we're saying to the government and to the authority, enough is enough. This is all about the environment. This plan is all about the environment. And there are things you can do without buying more water back that can benefit the environment. And some of you may have seen the great little video clip from the Guida Valley irrigators about cold water pollution. One of the things that stops the native fish breeding and has big impacts on our river system is the fact that when they let water go from some of the major dams, it comes from the bottom of the dam and it's cold water. And that stops the native fish breeding. It's not good for native fish. There's some pretty simple ways these days of actually pulling the water, the warm water from the top of the dam and releasing that. It stimulates native fish breeding. It's great for the river system. There's also, the pending release of the carp herpes virus, which, if we can get rid of that scourge of the river system, the carp, it'll have massive impacts on the health of the river system. So, the time for just adding water is gone. There's plenty of water in the system. The time is now for some other good ideas to help benefit the environment. We all want to benefit the environment, but it's more than just water, and it's more than just impacting our regional communities. Anyhow, enough of that little advertisement about that campaign, but certainly it's one that we certainly feel passionate about, because when we think about that plan, I'll just go on a little bit more about it. When we think about that plan, we know that when the government, I can still remember taking the phone call from Penny Wong's Chief of Staff, Longhead Tim Fisher, when he said, we're going to buy the water back, we're going to buy it back only from willing sellers at full market value. We knew that our farmers were protected, because before that, there was talk of compulsory acquisition and things like that. So we knew the farmers were protected. From then on, the battle was about protecting our rural communities, protecting the jobs in our rural communities, protecting the people that work at the cotton gin, the person that drives the fuel out to the farm, the person that's selling the fertiliser. It was about protecting those jobs. So that's where we are really at the moment, still trying to protect those jobs in our regional communities. Anyhow, the good news for our regional communities is that this year a 4 million bale crop is going to be phenomenal for a lot of regional communities. A 4 million bale crop generates about $2.5 billion worth of income into those areas, and that's pretty significant. To put it in perspective, 4 million bales in the sort of the world scheme of cotton is probably small. It's only 3%. Because we expect the world cotton crop to be around 120 million bales this year. So it's only 3% of global production. But we sit, because we export almost every bit we produce, apart from the bit that goes into the socks in Melbourne. But the bulk of the crop is exported, and because of that, Australia sits about fourth in the list of exporters globally. So the USA is the big exporter, Brazil, India, and then Australia's there on the list. So we're a big player as far as the export market and the global trade of cotton. Over the last 5 years, there's been a considerable expansion in cotton into the south, into the Riverina. Now, I think back again to 30 years ago. I can remember running field days at Warren, cotton field days, and you'd have these growers come down from the north. It'd be, and they'd be in the morning, they'd be all putting their jumpers on and shivering, saying, "How can you grow cotton here? It's too cold." It's just, and it was seen as a marginal area. People were questioning, can we grow cotton there? And we've seen over that last 30 years cotton move down to Trangie and Narromine and then down to Hillston, and we're seeing it now 600 or 700 kilometres further south. What's driving that? And certainly, one of the things that's driving it is our incredible researchers in the industry. There's no doubt that we've got a wonderful bunch of researchers just driving this industry forward. And I think I've got to really single out the CSIRO cotton breeders, because they've made a lot of things possible for our growers. And it started off, Norm Thompson was the original cotton breeder, and then he was supported by Peter Reid and then Greg Constable, and now Warwick Still is running the team, and they've certainly done a wonderful job at driving the yield and also importantly driving the fibre quality of the Australian crop. But it's certainly not breeding alone, and the other researchers have all contributed, and our growers that are just willing to adopt research so quickly. So it's all the things, the precision planning, the irrigation scheduling, all these other management techniques that have seen us being able to move into the southern areas. I sort of liken it a little bit to, 30 years ago, if you said, you'd grow a lot of wheat around Walgett, everyone would have looked at you and said, you're crazy. But think about all the fallow management techniques we've had, and moisture conservation and weed control, and now that area is a major wheat producing area. And it's the same sort of thing. Technology just drives us forward and opens up all sorts of opportunities. So you certainly never say never. If we go back to that Riverina expansion, though, we've got 4 cotton gins down there now. 4 companies that have made the big investment into putting that first stage of processing down in that area. You've got gins at Hillston, Whitten, Carrathool and Hay. And last year the area produced something like 600,000 bales of cotton. And that's worth about, that cotton lint would be worth about $300 million, and the seed would be worth another $40 million. So that's great income for that Riverina area. And I think the growers down there, when you talk to them, they just are pleased to have another option that they can use their irrigation water. It's not a cotton versus rice versus corn. It's just what are the options that are going to be best, because this year, because of the real wet conditions, the cotton window for planting down there is closing very quickly. But fortunately, you can plant rice up into the middle of November, so there's still an opportunity for them to put rice in. So it's great news for that area that they've got another option down there, and cotton's going to be an important option down there in the future. The other part of the industry where we sort of see expansion is certainly in dryland cotton, rain-grown cotton, and I know that there's something like 80 new growers already sort of on the books for growing rain-grown cotton this coming season. And the other area we see potential expansion is in the north of Australia, the Kimberley and the Gulf country up in Queensland. There's certainly, the industry's done a lot of research work in the past up in those northern areas, and now it's great to see there is commercial companies picking up that R&D, picking it up, and they've got confidence to start looking to make investments in those areas. So yeah, it's certainly exciting times in some of these other regions. One of the things that you've got to say I'm most proud about the industry is just the sharing of the knowledge in the cotton industry. And it hits home. When I talk to those new growers in the Riverina, they often say to me, we just can't believe this industry, just how people want to help you, they want to share ideas and knowledge, and it'll be other growers or different parts of the industry, and everyone wants to provide them assistance. And it also gets reinforced. This year we have our Biennial Cotton Conference. We had 1,940 delegates at the conference, and again it was all about just sharing knowledge, and no one sees each other in the Australian cotton industry as competitors. We're all in it together. We're selling a fibre onto a global market. We're not competitors. We're all in it together. And I can remember down at Hillston a couple of years ago, the grower of the year had a field day at his property, and he was talking about exactly the same thing. He'd had a history in horticulture production. He said, I'm sure people have told me a bit of BS and put me up the garden path and whatever, because they're all competing for some sort of contract there in horticulture, and they see me as opposition, whereas in cotton everyone's helping me. We're all part of that global market, and I think it's something we can't lose sight of. It's a real strength of our industry, and we've got to keep maintaining that into the future.